All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Men of Culture podcast. We are here for the final episode of our Percy Jackson and the Olympian Seasons 1 discussion, right? I don't know if wouldn't really call this more of a review because we're not really grading it per se, but we are kind of just talking about it, comparing it to the book and the movie, and then kind of giving our thoughts on it. So we loosely review it, but like mostly kind of just give our thoughts on the series, right? If you're new here, that's kind of how we do things. This is the final episode of our Percy Jackson discussion. So if you haven't watched the rest of them, you can go ahead and check the other ones. Those are the only videos we have up to this channel at this point. So then you can watch those, then you'll be ready to hear us talk about the final episode. So this final episode, it starts very similar to how it does in the book, right? I guess we can kind of sum up the movie because we can do that relatively quickly because not that much happens from at this point to the end of the movie. Right. But at this point in the movie, remember, the movie, it's very different. They had 3 pearls. They called them Persephone's pearls because Persephone essentially used them to help any visitors that she had leave the underworld, right? We talked about how that didn't make sense in the last episode because she's not supposed to be there during the summer, but I digress. That is how it happened in this movie. So she gives them the pearls. Grover stays behind, right? Grover stays behind. Percy, Annabeth, and Sally leave. And then the weird thing about these pearls is that you can actually choose what destination you go to with these pearls in the movie. So they just think Mount Olympus, and keep in mind that the underworld was underneath LA. Mount Olympus is above the Empire State Building in New York. So opposite ends of the country, right? They just think Olympus, and these pearls carry them all the way across the country in seconds, right? So it doesn't actually take them to Mount Olympus, though. It takes them to the Empire State Building. And they even say that because Percy's like, no, this isn't Olympus, this is the Empire State Building. And he sounds like really upset about it. I thought that was a little funny. Yeah. But then they're like, and then Sally was like, no, the entrance to Olympus is in the elevator, right? Mm-hmm. So they try to go to the elevator, and then this is when Luke shows up, right? Yeah. Luke shows up. Basically, it's very kind of short conversation. Like, so basically Luke comes in, then they're like, oh, you put the bolt in my shield. Why? And he said because he was like, oh, you told me you were going to the underworld. So he was like, oh, that was perfect opportunity to get the bolt to Hades. And and then they had like a little discussion about like, why the gods are the enemy and whatnot. And, you know, he's like, we can recreate a world in our image and, you know, full of us heroes. He's like the gods. It kind of follows the theme of what we've been seeing so far. And I kind of hinted at it early on in this series that like we're going to see that like the gods and their behavior and how they neglect a lot of their children is going to come back and bite them. And this is kind of the start of that, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or at least the start of it on a mass scale. Because right now it's still relatively small. They've basically just got Luke. But we're going to see as the series goes on, assuming we get the entire book series adapted into seasons of the show, mm-hmm. We're going to see how this kind of movement grows and grows. And by the end, it's going to be crazy. But, you know, not going to go into much into detail about that right now because that's many seasons from now. But this is kind of what Luke is saying. He's saying the gods are the enemy. They neglect their children kind of thing. And this discussion kind of goes the same in all versions in the movie, the show, and in the book. Basically Luke in all 3 is pretty much the same character. He just kind of has a little bit different way of going about things, but his end goal is all the same. So they have kept him relatively consistent throughout all of them. surprisingly. But yeah, so they kind of had the fight with him. Percy throws like a trident made of water at Luke, and then it sends him into the water, and he doesn't come up. So we're almost think like he drowned or something like.
Yeah.
The fight wasn't very long though. They were still trying to wrap it all up, and they had to include the very last scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the end of Luke for the movie. They go up to Olympus. All of the gods are in attendance at Olympus. It's basically just looks like this big golden hall kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't look like really anything special, but they really don't zoom in on much of the features. We're kind of just focused on the gods the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, it's this giant golden room. They actually, midnight strikes like 2 seconds before they walk in.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like the clock, the kind of the alarm goes off, and then it's just like, all right, well, it's time for war. And then like Percy runs in holding the bolt. He's like, hold on, wait. Like, and then like they kind of had a little conversation between them, and then like Zeus is like, oh, hand it here, lightning. And then he's like, oh, I didn't steal it. And he's like, oh, if you didn't steal it, then who did? And he was like, it was Luke, who was son of Hermes. He's like, he's really basically says that kind of he is very upset with the gods, and he considers the gods his enemy. And he says like he wanted the gods to destroy themselves, but that's not really what Luke wants.
Mm-hmm.
Luke wants to defeat the gods.
Yeah.
Luke is teaming up with Kronos to essentially gain enough forces to withstand the gods if they were to fight them in a war, right?
Right.
This war that they tried to cause between Zeus and Poseidon was only the beginning. It was meant to weaken them, to make them easier targets, right?
Yeah.
We see that that's not really going to happen, so their plans are going to have to change, but, you know, Luke kind of says in all three of them that, like, you've only really delayed Kronos' plans. Like, this really, in the grand scheme of things, you stopping the war between Zeus and Poseidon does not matter all that much, right? At least not to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've delayed their plans a little bit, but, like, you know, they can adapt and change things to suit their needs now, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how they go about. That's kind of how Luke kind of says it in all three of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, we have the scene where like they're talking to all of them, then they kind of just leave, and then there's like a little scene with Percy and his dad talking at the end. All the gods are like very big in the hall at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of them look like 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
And then like Percy's dad like actually shrinks down to normal size to talk to Percy for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a little scene where like Annabeth like says hi to her mom, and then like Athena says hi back. Like there's not really that much that goes on. Like in the book and in the show, all the gods are not present at this time.
Right.
It was weird that they decided to include all of them, but they didn't really introduce all of them. So you saw like a bunch of gods and goddesses in this room that like none of them had any lines. They kind of just had they just were doing different like expressions to what was going on.
Yeah.
Like seeing him walk in with the bolt, and they're just like, oh, like they didn't have any lines. They were all there for like no reason really.
Yeah.
Like, so that wraps up. They go back to Olympus. They were at Olympus. They go back to Camp Half-Blood, and then now they're all heroes at Camp Half-Blood now because they succeeded in this quest that they didn't have permission to go on. Like, remember in the movie, it was just something that they just snuck out to do.
Yeah.
Like, but in the book and in the show, it was a quest. Like, they had to get this quest approved. They had to seek the Oracle. The Oracle told them the prophecy, all that jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
The book was nothing like that. The Oracle was not even, the movie was nothing like that. There was no Oracle at all in the movie. They just decided to go. They come back there. Then Grover's all of a sudden back. They don't explain how he's back, right? Because they explained how very difficult it was to leave the underworld. But he's just back somehow.
Yeah.
By the time we make it back to Camp Half-Blood, he's back for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And like his horns are starting to grow, right?
Yeah.
And then like it kind of ends like where they're back at camp, they're having fun, they're doing camp activities, and like Percy and Annabeth have like one last duel at the very end of the movie, and that's really it. And then actually I think there's a post-credit scenes where Gabe dies because he opens the box with Medusa's head in it.
Yeah.
Keep in mind they were actually carrying Medusa's head with them throughout the entire quest after they killed Medusa in the movie. They didn't do that in the book in the show. Remember, they shipped it off to Olympus, right?
Yeah.
So that's the end of the movie. Well, going back into the book, into the show, we have the fight with Ares. And I mentioned in the end of last episode that this was the part of the show that I was looking forward to the most. And it was rushed. It was definitely rushed. And I understand why it was rushed because they had to squeeze in the rest of the episode. But I just skimmed through this episode right before this, we started recording this episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that fight encompassed about 6.5 minutes. So right from the beginning, right, to about 6.5 minutes, that's how long the fight goes, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, this fight does feel a little lackluster compared to how it was in the book, because in the book, it was just a lot more going on in the book, right? So keep in mind, they leave Hades, right? And Hades is mad at them. Hades is trying to kill them all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as they leave with the pearls to remember, Percy's mom is left behind in the book, and here in the show as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they leave Hades. They use the pearls to leave. They end up on the beach in Santa Monica. But Hades sends undead troops to come get them, right? And all three Furies.
Yeah.
So they have all of them chasing them on top of finding Ares to fight him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when Ares and Percy are fighting, there is like a huge crowd of people like circling them. The police are there, like, because remember the police. They go more into detail about it in the book, but they did show it off a little bit here in the show.
Mm-hmm.
That the police are after them because of the things that they did at the arch. They think that they set the building on fire, right?
Yeah.
So the police have been following them and chasing them ever since they left St. Louis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the police have caught up to them at this point, and the police see their swords, and they actually remember the mist is a thing, so the mist actually makes their swords look like guns to all the humans, right?
It's funny, actually.
Yeah. So like the police actually tell them, put down your guns, and then they kind of just look, and then Percy and Ares look at them like they're stupid, like. So yeah, they don't listen, and then like Ares is kind of able to like block them off, and then they do the fight, and the fight was like it was a really good fight just from reading it. I was like really into it at this point.
Yeah.
Percy does end up winning. He does not really go by the same rules that he kind of went by in the show, where it's like, oh, if I hit you once, I win, right?
Yeah.
First to draw blood wins the match, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, Percy actually, I think he had to like hit him a couple times, and he didn't really like slice. He like in the show, he kind of just sliced his ankle, but in the book, he kind of really stabbed it. Like it was not like a little slit. Like he really like stabbed his ankle and really went out to try to remove this man's ankle, like kind of thing.
Right.
Like that, it was like a much bigger thing kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And then like that's really the end of it. And then like it kind of ends very similarly, where like he kind of says like, you know what you've really won today? You've won an enemy for life, kind of thing. That's similarly how it happens in the book or in the show, where it was kind of interesting here that we actually got to see glimpses of Percy training with Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked how they included that, because it really kind of seemed like all that happened was Percy went to camp, didn't do any activity well, and then went on this quest, right? That's really how it looked like from how we saw it. But now they're showing us that there was more training that we just didn't see, that they weren't going to show us yet until now, so that they can show that Percy is using these things that he learned against Ares. And I really liked how they did that, because in the book, we got to see Percy and everybody at Camp Half-Blood for what it felt like a little bit longer in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like honestly, we had like really one whole episode with Percy at Camp Half-Blood, and that was the second episode. And then on the third episode, they're going on the quest.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there were multiple chapters that we had with them at Camp Half-Blood,
Mm-hmm.
and we got to see Percy train a little bit more. And also, there was a big thing that actually was not in the show at all, is that there was a hellhound, one of these creatures from the underworld that actually attacked Percy during the Capture the Flag game in the book. The movie and the show did not include this.
Mm-hmm.
And that was purposely put in the book because Luke summoned it to essentially scare Chiron, to make him think that Percy wouldn't be safe at Camp Half-Blood, so he had to send him on the quest as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That just didn't happen at all in the show. I don't know why they didn't include that, and I know I didn't mention that, but I wanted to wait until mentioning it now, because this is kind of when we find out that Luke did it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a little weird in the book, in the show, because they don't really kind of tell us how much time has gone past.
Mm-hmm.
But we see that like Percy makes it back to camp. He's celebrated as a hero, kind of like how he is in all three, in both in all the book, the show, and in the movie. He's celebrated as a hero, right?
Yeah.
Remember at the end, in the book, in the show, they thought that Clarice was the lightning thief, right?
Yeah.
And
I do
Percy and
remember
Annabeth and Grover are already back at camp at this point. Remember, because they didn't go. They didn't go to Olympus with them.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't even mention Olympus yet, did I? Well, in Olympus in the show, I think that I actually really liked the aspect of like the conversation between Percy and Zeus a lot.
Yeah.
And rest in peace to Lance Reddick, but like he did a really good job with Zeus.
Oh,
in the
he
show. I actually
absolutely
really
did.
liked him.
Yeah, same.
Like the
I'm
guy
a-
who did Zeus in the movie was kind of whatever.
Yeah.
He was literally just there just for them to hand him the bolt, and that was it. There was not really a conversation that went on between them all.
Yeah.
But like, and in the book, it's kind of similar. It's just Poseidon and Zeus at Olympus, and it feels like. And Percy mentions that feels like there's tension, like there was just an argument recently.
Mm-hmm.
So he gives them the bolt, then he kind of tells them what's going on. Then Zeus and Poseidon in the book have like a conversation in ancient Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And Percy says that the only word that he's able to catch is father, after Percy kind of explains that he's having these dreams of somebody talking to him in his sleep, and he's like, he thought it was Hades, but like clearly wasn't after this quest. And so they kind of come to the conclusion that it was Kronos. And they don't mention Kronos at all in the movie, at all. Not mentioned at all.
No.
And in both the book and in the show, they mention it. And Percy has already come to the conclusion that it was Kronos.
Yes.
And then, like, Percy goes to Zeus, and he gives him the bolt, and then he tells him that it's Kronos. And then Zeus is kind of just like, okay, thank you for the information, you may go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was like, this is crucial information. It's the only reason why I'm letting you leave alive, but the war is still going to continue, right?
Yeah.
He's going to continue the war because he wants to continue the war. And then Percy's like, well, you can't continue this war. That's what Kronos wants. He wants you to weaken yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you don't need to. Zeus basically tells him, like, you don't need to tell me what Kronos wants, kind of thing. He's like, I am his son. I know where he is. I put him there. I know exactly what he's going to do. He was like, we plot and we strive. He was like, that's what we do, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he tells Percy. And then Percy kind of really, really tells him off here. He was like, it's not just Kronos. He was like, it's not just this war. This was only the beginning. He was like, your family is an absolute mess. He was like, your family is not loyal to you because they love you. They're loyal to you because they fear you.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, look at what Ares did. As soon as someone stronger showed up, he switched sides. He was like, how long do you think it's going to take before everyone else does the same?
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where, like, Zeus actually attacks Percy because he's pissed that Percy says something like that, and then Poseidon comes in and saves Percy, right? This discussion didn't really happen in the book. I actually do like this scene in the show a little bit more, because I do like that Percy is really emphasizing that, like, we need to, like, really sort this out. Like, you guys can't just have your war and just, like, ignore Kronos for the time being. Like, he's got people on his side, and he's only going to get stronger the longer we kind of let him do his thing. So, but, like, Zeus kind of just brushes it off as if, like, it's not even going to be a big deal here. But he does say, like, they have the same kind of conversation in ancient Greek, where it's like, Zeus is asking Poseidon, oh, how many people know about Kronos? And then he's like, oh, Ares, Hades, Hermes. And then Zeus is like, okay, so basically everybody. And then he's like, okay, we need to have, like, a meeting. And then Poseidon actually surrenders here and says, I surrender, take your victory, just let me have just don't kill my son, kind of thing. And then Zeus has to add here, he's like, we're going to announce my crushing victory, and then we'll discuss family business. And I'm like, he just has to rub it in right there. They're like, oh yeah, we have to discuss my crushing victory, and then we'll talk about family business. But they have to mention his victory first.
Oh yeah, of course, naturally.
Yeah, so that's where Zeus leaves. He kind of tells Poseidon, he's like, don't let me see this one again. And then they mentioned before Percy went to Olympus that, like, you're a forbidden kid. Like, that's a big deal. Zeus isn't going to want you alive. And then Zeus kind of brings that up. He's like, when Poseidon saves him and asks him to spare him, he's like, your forbidden son. He was like, the same as your Thalia, who still inspires many demigods to this day. Like, and then he says this about Percy. He's like, Percy is one of these heroes. And he's like, and he's been very brave today. He's done a lot. Like, he's done extraordinarily well, kind of thing. He's really kind of complimenting Percy on his job with this quest kind of right here. Even though they were late, which I still don't like that they did, but it is what it is, right? Even though that they were late, at the end of the day, he did still get the bolt, and he still did bring it back to Olympus, right? So, and then he brought this news of Kronos rising to them, so they know that war with Kronos is going to come very soon. Kind of thing, right? So then, like, they're back on Camp Half-Blood. Again, they kind of don't really tell us how much time has passed, but then we see this scene with Percy and Luke where they kind of got the fireworks going, and Percy and Luke are down there talking, and then Luke's like, come on, Percy, like, why haven't you said anything? You've, like, they said, like, 2 words since we left the cabins. Like, and then this is where Percy kind of comes to the conclusion that Luke was the lightning thief, right? In the book, it goes a little bit different. Like, they actually tell us that months have gone by, but, like, in the book, it was kind of weird. It was like they weren't actively seeking the demigod who actually took the lightning bolt, right? Like, they just kind of said, okay, it was Kronos. He had somebody do it, right? Like, but they don't actively go to try and, like, find out who actually did it, kind of thing. I don't know why, but, like, it kind of was just like, okay, yeah, we got the bolt back, we're done. Ares had it, like, Kronos talked to Ares, and Ares did it and whatnot. That's kind of just what they went by, right? And they didn't really pay attention to be like, oh, well, who is the demigod who did it, kind of thing, right? So here in the show, Percy comes to the conclusion that it was Luke. He was like, the reason why Clarice wasn't arrested or anything, or the reason why Clarice is still here at camp is because you never went and talked to Chiron. He's like, you never told Chiron that she was a lightning thief because you knew she wasn't, because you did it. And then this is the part where, like, Luke tries to explain. He's like, and it's very different in the show than it is in the book. Like, in the book, like, it was like Luke actually really resented Percy at this point in the book, right? because in the book, Luke kind of sees it as like, oh, like Percy's been a thorn in his side kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then like this scene where Percy is talking about, he was like, oh, you're the one, you cursed the flying shoes to pull me down into Tartarus. And then Luke gets kind of mad here, and he's like, oh, and they would have had you been wearing them instead of Grover. He was like, Grover messes up everything he touches, kind of thing. He gets like really mad here in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And in the show, he's like, well, I didn't think you'd give them to Grover to wear. And like, he kind of just sounded like, and the big difference here in the show is that Luke actually tries to recruit Percy to his cause, right?
Yeah.
He kind of tells him like, oh yeah, the gods are my enemy kind of thing. It's kind of the same conversation in all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kind of, the gods are my enemy. Like, in the book, they go a little more into detail that like Luke had trained for years, and like they gave him a quest, and his quest was just to like retrieve a fruit from a dragon kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he got attacked by the dragon, and that's why he has the scar on his face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he failed the quest, and then kind of just silence. He felt like he was kind of just ignored by everybody after that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like Percy tries to talk to him and be like, no, that's not an easy thing to do. Like Hercules did it. And he was like, yeah, Hercules did it. So why are they giving me a quest that someone else has already done? He's like, where's the glory in doing stuff that people have already done, kind of thing, right? And he was like, he was at camp for years. And then he kind of resents Percy a little bit too, probably because he got treated a little bit differently at camp. Percy's been at camp for all of like a couple weeks, maybe. And then he goes on this quest where Luke trained for years and years, right? Before they finally granted him a quest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his quest was to just grab some fruit from a dragon. Meanwhile, Percy was at camp for all of 2 weeks and got a quest to save the world from another war. Like Percy got trusted with this big deal quest, right?
Yeah.
But all Luke got was, oh, go get this fruit from this dragon, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he holds a little resentment for Percy because of that. But in the show, it's not like that. He was like, in the show, he's like, Percy, like he pulls out his sword, Backbiter, to show Percy. Percy gets ready to pull out his sword to fight, and Luke's is like, no, I don't want to fight. I just wanted to show you something.
Yeah.
And then he shows that like his sword is actually able to like rip portals, like basically create portals out of nothing.
Yeah.
And he said like this is their way out of camp, and they only start to fight really when Percy mentions Luke's dad, because that's kind of what really sets him off there, because you mentioned his dad. That's really kind of the triggering thing for him, right? That's the triggering thing for him and everyone, in all of them. But like that's really what kind of makes him fight. But even then, like towards the end, like Luke is still like, you know, he's still like, you know, this is your last chance. Are you going to join me on this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, Percy does end up slicing Luke with his sword, and then Luke ends up getting Percy on the arm with his. And then Annabeth kind of throws a stick at him, and we see that Annabeth was invisible there the whole time, and she heard everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so at this point, like, Luke runs away, and he runs into the portal that he created.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of it, right?
Yeah.
It's very different because there's no actual fight between Percy and Luke in the book, right? Percy tries to, but like I don't know what Luke did. He learned some type of magic trick or something, because he literally just snapped his fingers and then a scorpion appeared, right?
Mm-hmm.
He snapped his fingers, it's this pit scorpion, it's staring directly at Percy. It's completely ignoring Luke, and it's looking directly at Percy, and it starts to crawl up his leg, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Percy goes to try to get his sword, but he's like, Luke's like, I wouldn't. They like to jump. If you scare them, it's going to jump at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then so Percy, like Luke is kind of saying, like, oh, I'm sorry. He was like, you were supposed to die in Tartarus, but it's okay. I'm going to resolve that right now. Like, Luke did not want Percy around. Like, in the show, Percy, like, Luke really wanted to recruit Percy.
Yeah.
And because he really believed that Percy would be a good, like, ally towards their cause. And Kronos does too. And Kronos does believe that Percy would be very valuable to him. And that's why Cronus is going to try and convince Percy throughout the entire series to join his side, right? But Luke really doesn't want that. Luke doesn't want Percy anywhere near them because he sees Percy as a threat.
Yeah.
Because he really does know how powerful Percy can be. And he does not want to see, he wants Percy out of the way as soon as possible so that they don't have to worry about him interfering with their plan, kind of thing, right?
Right.
So that's why Luke literally doesn't even fight. He leaves the scorpion and Luke tells Percy, he's like, after it stings you, you got about 60 seconds before you're done, kind of thing, right? So Luke leaves him with this scorpion, and then he kind of creates like a dust cloud with his sword, and he kind of leaves. And in the show, they didn't really talk about his sword much, but they did talk about it a little bit here in the book, where in the book, like, Percy actually goes to train in the fields when he finds Luke, and Luke is like destroying the dummies that they use to practice on, like literally destroying them to where they can't use them anymore, but he's about to leave camp, so he doesn't care.
Right.
Like, so then they decide to go out into the woods and find something to kill one last time before the end of the summer, right? And Luke has like a 6-pack of Coke with him, which Percy is like very confused by that, because like you can't get soda like that in Camp Half-Blood. Like, none of the stores at campus sell them, and like you have to like maybe like make a deal with a with a satyr or something like that if you're gonna sneak in soda from the outside world, kind of thing.
Right.
Like, you have to like be very sneaky about it. Be like, hey, can you go and get me some Mountain Dew from the gas station down the street, like, kind of thing. Like, that's how they make it out to be in the book. They don't really go into detail about them bringing outside drinks because they never really show it.
Yeah.
And like in the books, Percy like absolutely loves Coca-Cola, but they don't really go into detail with that at all in the show. But in the book, like, yeah, Luke has like a 6-pack of Coke, and they go out and they try to find a monster to kill, and they're drinking Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we get to this point. So then Percy tries to get Luke to fight him. He tries to bait him into a fight. He's like, oh, if you're so strong, why can't you just beat me right here? He was like, why do you have to leave a little scorpion to do your work for you? And like, Luke is not baitable like that. Like, he's like, nice try, but you can't bait me into a fight like Larry's. He was like, he kind of says like the golden age is coming. He's like, and I'm sorry, Percy, but you're not going to be around to witness it. So as Luke leaves, then the scorpion jumps at Percy. Percy swats it away with his hand, and then it jumps back at him, and then he has enough time to pull out his sword and slice the scorpion and kill it. But he didn't realize that when he slapped it, it actually stung his hand. And so he is just barely able to make it back to camp in time for them to give him medicine to heal him. So Percy almost dies here in the show, right? Or in the book, excuse me. In the show, it's kind of like a really short fight that really didn't really want to happen. And then Luke leaves, right? As soon as he sees Annabeth.
Yeah.
And then, but that's not how it happens in the book. Like I said, like, Percy makes it to camp just barely. They heal him. He does pass out. He wakes up, and then he tells them what happened, right? And at this point, they've signified that this is kind of the end of the summer. This is kind of the last day that all the campers who stay only for the summer are going to be there. Like, all of them are packing their bags, and like their parents are coming and getting them or whatever, right? So, or they're they're sorting out rides to go to the city or wherever they live. You know, all these Half-Bloods, they live all across the country, not just in New York, right? So we know that the end of the summer is coming here in the show, because like after all of this, we see that Percy's home and his mom tells him it's time to get ready for school. And then also after they come back and like after they go to Chiron and tell him what happened with Luke, then like Mr. D comes in and he was just like, oh, you're still here, kind of thing. And then he's like, oh, all campers who don't want to stay for the whole year, get out. Like, that was kind of funny. Like, I definitely think that they really nailed Mr. D in this show, because that's exactly how he's like. Like, they presented that a little bit differently at this point. He wrote letters and just said basically, if you don't plan to stay, then get out, kind of thing, right? right?
Yeah.
And then he still wrote his name wrong on the letter. He still wrote Peter Johnson on the letter that he left for Percy. So, but like, yeah, I think they really nailed him. And then at this point, it was a little weird here. Like, they're getting ready to leave. Like, they didn't tell us this, but in the book, like, Percy kind of mentioned, like, maybe you should reach out to your dad. Maybe you guys can, you know, fix your relationship. And so she did. And they're sitting kind of at Camp Half-Blood at the edge of the hill where they see, like, Annabeth's dad and his wife. So Annabeth's stepmom are down there waiting for them. And she kind of says bye to Percy, kind of thing. And they kind of talk about it like, oh yeah, we know that Kronos is rising. They agree that in a year, they're gonna, when they come back to camp, they're gonna come up with a plan to fight Kronos. They're gonna go after him. Or they're gonna go after Luke, specifically. And they're gonna do whatever it takes, kind of thing. They're gonna ask for a quest, and even if they don't get a yes on the quest, they're gonna go anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so they agree to that. Then they kind of say their goodbyes. Then Annabeth goes down the hill. She greets her mom, her stepmom, and her dad, and then they kind of leave, right? So she's leaving to San Francisco because that's where her parents live, right? So in the show, it's a little bit different. In the book, Grover was actually gone by this point because Grover got his searcher's license to look for Pan, and then he leaves before the summer is even over. So Grover is not here at the end of the book to like see what happened with like Luke and everything, right? So here in the show, all three of them are kind of gathered up at like the top of the hill, like right outside the entrance to Camp Half-Blood. And then like Grover shows them his searcher's license, and he's like, yeah, I'm officially licensed to go search for Pan. And then he was like, you know, the theory is that Pan is always on the move. That's why he's so hard to find, but people haven't really checked the seas. And then Percy's like, oh, I know some people in management out there. If you need some help, it was like, we can help you out, kind of thing, right? And then Grover's like, yeah, I'll call you if I ever need anything from the sea, kind of thing, right? And then they all kind of like make a pact here, like, oh, in a year we're gonna meet up and continue, almost like. You know what this scene actually reminded me of? It's actually kind of funny. I don't know if you've seen it, but at the end of the movie, where they all kind of like make a pact saying, "Oh, if Pennywise ever comes back, we're gonna come back here and kill him," kind of thing. That's honestly what this kind of reminded me of. I'm just like, what is this? The kids making a pact to come back and kill Pennywise? Like they're all sitting here, holding their hands together, like. In a year, we're gonna come back here. Yeah, we're gonna get together and gonna continue our quest and continue to try to like stop Luke and Kronos, right? Like that just it was presented a little weird to me. Like that is what came to my mind. It'd be funny if you actually included that scene from it in this part when I'm talking about it, so people know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But like yeah, that's honestly the kind of feeling that I got. Obviously, it's completely different because it is a horror series and this is Percy Jackson. But, like, it was a little weird. It was like, again, I just don't know why they waited till the end to have Grover get his searcher's license. I guess it doesn't really matter that much in the long run. But, like, It was kind of weird to have them all hold hands and be like, oh, yeah, we're gonna go after Luke and we're gonna fight Kronos, and we agree to all meet up here in a year to do so, kind of thing. I thought it was a little bit better in the book, where it was just kind of like Percy and Annabeth kind of like they've really grown close over the quest. Percy and Grover were already close, but Annabeth and Percy really got to know each other through the course of this quest. Yeah. And now they're kind of agree that like they feel like it's kind of up to them to make sure that they go after Luke and stop him from bringing Kronos back and bringing this new golden age, as they're calling it, kind of thing. Yeah. And they believe that, like, you know, even if they, for whatever reason, they don't approve for them to go on this quest, they're going to go anyway because they truly believe that, like, you know, they have to go out and stop this. Like, this is not something that you can just let happen, kind of thing, right? Yeah. So that's where it ends there. like Percy ends up deciding that he's gonna go back home, and we don't get to see Percy actually starting to go back to school. We see that in the next book, but it kind of ends right there, right? We do see Percy go back home very briefly to kind of check in on his mom, because his mom is now home. They actually do tell him that he's home. And this is kind of where Percy is what Poseidon told Percy on Olympus is kind of coming clear now, because I actually forgot to mention it, but like Poseidon told Percy while they were on Olympus that like, oh, you're gonna see there's something for you, you're gonna have a decision to make, kind of thing. And Poseidon was hinting at Medusa's head, because they sent it back to Percy, right? They sent it to Percy's house, and basically Percy witnesses Gabe hitting his mom. And then Percy basically tells his mom, look, we have Medusa's head here, kind of thing. Like, we can get rid of Gabe permanently, kind of thing, right? And he leaves Medusa's head for his mom to kind of make that decision, right? And like I said, it kind of happens similarly to how it does in the movie. And then in the show, they kind of just leave it for him at the door. But like, they don't really tell us that like, she used the head on him. But they kind of just told her, like, Percy was writing to his mom throughout the summer, and she kind of she told him like, oh yeah, so she recently started this sculpting business, and she sold her first sculpture called the Poker Player. Like, so she doesn't flat out say, yeah, I used the head on him, but she's like, yeah, I made a sculpture called the Poker Player, and I sold it, but I think I'm done making sculptures now. I'm moving on to other things in my life. That's how she worded it in her letter to Percy. So she doesn't flat out say, yeah, I used the head on him, but she does kind of say, yeah, you know, I used the head on him, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So Gabe is now dead. He's been turned to stone by Medusa's head. In every single one, Gabe dies the same way in all three, right? And I know some people felt a little weirded by this because they didn't really feel like Gabe was all that bad in the show.
Yeah.
And because, like, now I will say, yeah, I do think the movie did portray Gabe a little bit closer to how he was in the book, because he was very abusive physically as well. Because remember, in the movie, he actually did put his hands on Percy, and then Grover attacked him with his crutches, right?
I do remember that.
So, like, but like we mentioned it before, there are some changes that they're just gonna make in this, not only because it's an adaptation, but also because it's being Disney-fied, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna kind of have to accept that some things might not happen as it is, and I am fairly certain that they would not allow a scene that has domestic violence of a man assaulting a woman be in the show.
No.
Like, they would not allow that. Like, because like I said, in the book, Gabe hits Percy's mom. He does. So I'm like, there's no way that they would allow that to be shown on a screen on their platform. There's no way.
No, of course not.
They would not allow that. So I'm fairly certain that they had no choice but to not include Gabe's like physical violence, right? So they had to tame him down. Like, Gabe is still obviously very much a jerk, and he, like, you could still see that, like, you know, he has a lot of these negative qualities that would make you think, why is Percy's mom with him? But, like, you know, I'm fairly certain they had to definitely, like, do away with, like, all the physical violence that he has. You know, maybe if this was on Netflix, Netflix would be a little more willing to try and work with that. But, like, I was thinking about it, like, after we talked about it in the last couple episodes, especially with the casino one, where, like, Disney wouldn't allow a show with kids playing in a casino on their platform. Like, I was thinking about it, maybe if they had gotten the deal with Netflix instead of Disney, because while Netflix likes to do their own stupid stuff, like, they usually are a lot easier to work with than Disney is.
Yeah.
So they might have had a little less problems had they been working with Netflix instead of Disney, but it's with Disney, and I know for sure that if they were working with Netflix, then they would have been able to probably get like seasons 2 and 3 confirmed by now.
Yeah.
Because they only have 2. Like Netflix confirmed seasons 2 and 3 for Netflix Avatar. So they definitely would have confirmed multiple seasons at the same time so that they can go ahead and film while these kids are young so they don't get too old for the characters that they are playing, right?
Yeah.
But Disney's never going to approve more than 1 season at a time. Like, they are just too stubborn for that. We know that, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, I think that like maybe they would have had a little more leeway to write the story the way that they wanted to had they been working with Netflix. But at this point, that's kind of where it all wraps up. Like, Percy ends up going back home. We see in the show he's back home and his mom's saying like, oh yeah, it's time for 7th grade. And, Percy had yet another dream about Kronos. He's still talking to him. And, Percy kind of tells him like, oh, when you're ready to face me in person, then come find me kind of thing, right? Percy is actively challenging Kronos to come after him. And Kronos kind of just says, oh, he's like, I can't wait for that to happen kind of thing. Like, oh, your survival is key to my return kind of thing. So both Luke and Kronos definitely want Percy to survive so that he can aid them kind of thing, right? And Chiron even says this in the show that like, yes, you could be a very powerful ally to Kronos' cause. And then he's like, Kronos can be very, very persuasive. And Percy's like, yeah, well, I'm very, very stubborn. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where it ends there. And then like Percy kind of tells his mom, well, she kind of just knows that he had a nightmare. We can kind of just assume that this has happened multiple times, and she kind of just knows what's happening at this point. She's like, what did he say this time? And he's like, he said, make sure to tell your mother that you really love her today. And she's like, Kronos, the Lord of the Titans said that? He's like, well, he could have. Like, so he's definitely trying to like not really worry about it. He's just really happy that he was able to save his mom. So it kind of ends there, like with a little kind of internal dialogue from Percy, kind of mirroring what happened at the beginning, where he says like, oh, if you ever feel like you didn't fit in, maybe you're one of us, and if you are one of us, like definitely seek us out. We can definitely help you and learn what being a demigod is kind of all about, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it ends there, and that is the end of season 1. So we're going into book 2, season 2, movie 2, whenever the season 2 of this show comes out, which it's looking like it's probably going to take about a year and a half or so. It took them about 2 years from the time they announced that this show was going to be a thing to the point where the first 2 episodes went up on Disney Plus. It was about 2 years.
Yes.
So we can use that timeline to kind of get an idea of how long this one will take. Keep in mind, they only have to cast a few more different characters because they have most of the cast here now. So they don't have to do like a mass casting of finding all the characters. They only really have to find a couple for the new characters that appear here, right? So casting is not going to take nearly as long. And they have already been writing the script. They actually were already writing the script before the first episode went up on Disney Plus. So they've already been working on season 2 before they even got approval to work on season 2. So they've already started that. So that probably tells me that it's not going to take quite as long. I could see it happening in about a year and a half.
Yeah.
So in a year and a half, when season 2 comes out, we will bring this series back for Percy Jackson, and we will do essentially the same thing that we've done here. Just talk about every single episode and talk about our thoughts, compare it to like the book, the movie, and then that'll be it. But until then, we do have some plans for something else. So we did mention throughout this series that we were going to do Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I think we still do want to go do that at some point, but immediately we thought it was a better idea if we talk about something that we actually like.
Yeah.
And our plans for the next episode are actually going to talk about Spider-Verse. So both of these movies are actually some of my favorite movies of all time. I know they're definitely some of your favorite movies, Spencer.
Oh,
so
yeah, absolutely, 1000%. So I'm gonna have fun talking about both for different reasons. Like the first one, I definitely had some thoughts I wanted to express that I don't really think some people touched on, and then the second one has like, God, I could talk about the second one for hours, honestly, but you know, there's so many things that I would love to touch on in that one, but yeah, like we're both fans of these movies.
yeah, so these movies are some of my favorite movies of all time. So we knew that when we started this series, this podcast, that we were going to talk about Spider-Verse at some point.
Yeah.
But then I was just like, you know what? What if we just go into Spider-Verse immediately after we finish Percy Jackson?
Yeah.
So how we're going to do that is basically each movie is going to encompass one episode. So we're going to have one episode to talk about the first one, and then one episode to talk about the second one, and that'll be kind of our thing for Spider-Verse. And then when the third movie comes out, we'll probably have a podcast episode about it immediately, because we'll probably go to see it as soon as we can when the third one comes out.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm 1000%. Like.
So we definitely will talk about that third one when that movie comes out. But for the time being, we're going to be talking about the first two, and like I said, the first episode. The next episode will be about Into the Spider-Verse. So definitely have that to look forward to. Overall, I did really enjoy this show. Like I said, as I watched through it again for this series, there were some things that I originally didn't think anything of that now my opinions have changed a little bit. Like the deadline being one of the big ones. Like when I first watched the show, I was like, oh, that's not really that big of a deal. But now I'm like, no, that really does matter a lot. That makes the story feel a lot less significant in a few different ways, actually. So
Yeah.
I am really not a fan of that. Overall, I'd definitely give it a solid score. If I had to give it like a letter grade, I think I'd give it like a C. Like,
Yeah.
it's not the best thing ever, but at the same time, we have seen Percy Jackson done much worse with the movie.
Yeah.
The movie, I'd get an F plus if I'm feeling gracious, right? But like,
That's crazy.
but like here in the show, I do think it started out really strong. I still stand by that the first two episodes are the best two episodes of the whole season.
Oh yeah. I agree.
Like,
I agree.
I think that they did a really good job of getting us into it. I think that it kind of fell flat in a couple instances along the way. But when I first watched this, I thought the first two episodes were the best episodes, and I still stand by that now. The first two episodes are absolutely amazing. And then the next few episodes, you have a couple that kind of go down a little bit. Then the third, fourth, and fifth episodes are kind of just okay, but like they're doing the whole separation thing, and they did it here again because only Percy went to Olympus, and then Grover and Annabeth went to camp. So
Yeah.
they did the whole separation thing again. That's my one thing. Can we not do that in the next season? Can we not? Please, like, don't do that. Like, I don't understand why they thought it was a good idea to separate them at like every single area of the quest, but like that got really annoying really fast. Like, I don't understand why. Like, it just makes you get, like, the whole point of having three on the quest is like you purposefully pick three different people who have three different kind of skill sets that can all fit well together. They can all cover each other's weaknesses well, so that they can all succeed. But if you constantly separate them, then what's the point of pairing them with people who work well with them if they're constantly separated on every step of the way? So that's why I'm like, please do not separate them. Like, there are points in the books where they do get separated, yes, but it's not like they get separated on every step of the quest.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, can we please not separate them? Like, that got really annoying. Like, that's probably my least favorite thing about this show, is how often they like to separate them.
Yep. Like, like I said, it was like an episode of Scooby-Doo where they just split it when they look for clues.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it felt more like the Percy Jack. Percy was supposed to be on a quest with like his friends, but it just felt like the Percy show most of the time because like the amount of times like he was alone like by himself was actually crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's just like they even acknowledge that they're splitting them up so much in the show, right? They even say in the Lotus Casino, I thought we shouldn't do that anymore. Oh, well, we got to find him, so we can't afford to waste too much time, so we're splitting up. You even acknowledge in the show that you're splitting them up too much, and you still continue to split them up. Like, that is my main thing. There was like a lot of the changes that we talked about that we weren't really fans of. But like I said, I didn't really like how they went about with the echidna kind of thing and the way they made Athena seem in the 4th episode.
Yeah.
But overall, everybody is expressing, their feelings about the show. They're giving their critiques kind of thing. I know some people say that it feels like that Rick Riordan is not really listening based off of his responses. But I do know his wife has kind of like expressed that like she is open to hearing the feedback, and she's honestly just been working just as much on this show as he has. So if she is open to like listening to people's feedback, I'm sure she can probably like convince them like, hey, maybe we went a little too far with some of these changes. Like maybe we should dial it back a little bit on the 2nd season, right? So, we'll see how it goes. Like I said, we've got at least a year before we even get that season. So, and we haven't heard anything about it as of right now, other than it's happening. So, we're just gonna have to wait and see for that.
We'll just wait and see what happens.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this episode of the Men of Culture podcast. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. I know this one was a long one, but we just had a lot to say as far as, doing our usual comparison of the book, show, and movie, and then doing our final thoughts and kind of doing our little announcements at the end kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that is really it for this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the entire series. Like I said, this was a fun one. I think this was a cool little start to kind of our thing that we're doing here. And we definitely have some more stuff for the future. Like I said, Spider-Verse is next, so that will be the very next episode that y'all see up on this channel. So, with that is going to be the end of this episode. I hope you guys have a great evening or day whenever you're watching this video. And we hope that you guys stay tuned for the next episode, which we will talk about Into the Spider-Verse.
So we'll catch y'all in that episode.
Yep, we'll see y'all then. Take care.